I'll be going into detail in a minute, but simply put, the bill will lower health care costs for millions of Americans. It will be the most important investment, not hyperbole, the most important investment we've ever made in our energy security and developing cost savings and job-creating clean energy solutions for the future. It's a big deal. Also, for the first time in a long time, began to restore fairness to the tax code, by making the largest corporations in America pay their fair share without any new taxes on people making under $400,000 a year. Experts, even some experts who have criticized my administration in the past, agree that this bill will reduce inflationary pressures on the economy. This bill will, in fact, reduce inflationary pressure on the economy. It's a bill that will cut your cost of living and reduce inflation and it lowers the deficit. It strengthens our economy in the long run as well. This bill has won the support of climate leaders like former Vice President Al Gore, who said the bill is, quote, long overdue and a necessary step to ensure the United States takes decisive action on the climate crisis that helps our economy and provides leadership for the world by example. Inflation hawks like former Secretary of Treasury Larry Summers said, quote, this bill is fighting inflation. Let me say, this bill is fighting inflation. Progressive leaders like Senator Elizabeth Warren said, quote, this is a bill that truly is about fighting inflation, bringing down the cost for families, and putting our country on a sounder economic footing. Here's how it works. First, the bill finally delivers on a promise that Washington has made for decades to the American people. We're giving Medicare the power to negotiate for lower prescription drug prices, which means seniors and consumers will pay less for their prescription drugs. Medicare will save in the process about $290 billion. And in addition, it also changes the circumstances for people on Medicare by putting a cap of a maximum $2,000 a year. They have to pay no more than $2,000 a year no matter how many prescriptions they have for all the prescription drugs, which is especially important for people with cancer and long-term diseases. It's a godsend. It'll literally be a godsend for many families. Second, the bill locks in place lower health care premiums for the next 3 years for millions of families that get coverage under the Affordable Care Act. They will mean an average savings of $800 a year for 13 million people. Third, it invests $369 billion. Granted, I call for 500 plus, but it invests $369 billion to secure our energy future and to address the climate crisis, bringing down family energy bills by hundreds of dollars by providing working families tax credits. It gives folks rebates to buy new and efficient appliances, to weatherize their homes, and tax credits for heat pumps and rooftop solar. It also gives consumers a tax credit to buy any electric vehicle or fuel cell vehicle, new or used, and a tax credit for up to $7,500 if those vehicles were made in America. This investment in environmental justice is real. It also provides tax credits that will create thousands of good-paying jobs, manufacturing jobs, on clean energy construction projects, solar projects, wind projects, clean hydrogen projects, carbon capture projects, and more by giving tax credits for those who build these projects here in America. Now, let me be clear. This bill would be the most significant legislation in history to tackle the climate crisis and improve our energy security right away. It'll give us a tool to meet the climate goals that are set, that we've agreed to, by cutting emissions and accelerating clean energy, a huge step forward. Fourth, this bill requires the largest corporations to begin to pay toward their fair share in taxes by putting in place a 15% corporate minimum tax. Now, I know you've never heard me say this before. It will come as a shock to you, but 55 of the Fortune 500 companies paid no federal income tax in 2020. I know you only heard me say that about 10,000 times, But the fact is, they paid no taxes on an income, collective income, over $40 billion. Well, guess what? This bill ends that. They're going to have to pay a minimum of 15% tax on that $40 billion or whatever the number turns out to be. Fifth, this package will reduce the federal deficit by over $300 billion. Already on my watch, deficits come down my first year by $350 billion and a record $1.7 trillion at the end of this fiscal year. Now, this bill is going to keep that progress going. Yes, I'll say it again. This legislation will bring down the deficit. Bring down the deficit. The sixth point I want to make is this bill will not raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. And I promise, a promise I made during the campaign and one that I've kept. Now look, I know it can sometimes seem like nothing gets done in Washington. I know it never crossed any of your minds, but the work of the government can be slow and frustrating and sometimes even infuriating. Then the hard work of hours and days and months from people who refuse to give up pays off. History is made. Lives are changed. With this legislation, we're facing up to some of our biggest problems, and we're taking a giant step forward as a nation. That didn't just happen on this Inflation Reduction Bill. It also happened yesterday when the Senate made the bipartisan decision as a nation to invest in America's manufacturing technology of semiconductors and additional funding for basic research and development in the cutting-edge industries of the 21st century. If the House passes this bill, I want to thank Speaker Pelosi. I think she's going to get it done for her leadership here. It has the added benefit of creating tens of thousands of additional good-paying jobs, lowering inflation. It's going to give us the ability not only to compete with China for the future, but to lead the world and win the economic competition of the 21st century. You've heard me say 1,000 times, we have to invest in research, development, and growth. I hope that the House is going to pass this bill today. My plea is, put politics aside. Get it done. We need to lower the cost of automobiles, appliances, smartphones, consumer electronics, and so much more. And you can't do it. All of these things are powered. Almost everything in our lives is powered by these semiconductors and tiny computer chips the size of a fingernail tip. Look, we should pass this today and get moving. I know the compromise on the inflation bill doesn't include everything that I've been pushing for since I got to office. For example, I'm going to keep fighting in the future to bring down the cost of things for working families and middle-class families that matter by providing for affordable and accessible things like affordable child care, affordable elder care, preschool, the cost of preschool, housing, keeping students with helping students with the cost of college, closing the health care coverage gap. You know, it's a fancy way of saying the health care coverage gap. Expanding Medicaid in states that refuse to do it, and more. Look, this bill is far from perfect. It's a compromise. But it's often how progress is made, by compromises. And the fact is that my message to Congress is this. This is the strongest bill you can pass to lower inflation, cut the deficit, reduce health care costs, tackle the climate crisis, and promote energy security, all the time while reducing the burdens facing working class and middle class families. So pass it. Pass it for the American people. Pass it for America. I'll have more to say in this later. Now I want to thank Leader Schumer and Manchin, Joe Manchin, Senator Manchin, for the extraordinary effort that it took to reach this result. Thank you. And let me speak to one other issue. The GDP, and whether or not we are in a recession. Both Chairman Powell and many of the significant banking personnel and economists say we're not in a recession. But let me just give you what the facts are in terms of the state of the economy. Number one, we have a record job market of record unemployment of 3.6% today. We've created 9 million new jobs so far, just since he became president. Businesses are investing in America at record rates, Foreign business like SK and others are investing in America, hundreds of millions and trillions of dollars, sum total. $100 billion in semiconductor investments already announced by Intel, Samsung, and Texas Instruments. More than $100 billion in electric vehicle battery investments by Ford, General Motors, Hyundai, Tesla, and more. And just last week, as I said, SK Corporation of the Republic of Korea announced $22 billion in new investment in semiconductor batteries, chargers, and medical devices, creating another 16,000 jobs here in America. And this is powering the strongest rebound in American manufacturing in over 3 decades, creating 613,000 manufacturing jobs. Passing the CHIPS bill is going to put another $72 billion for incentives and tax credits to expand semiconductor production. And the Inflation Reduction Act will add another $370 billion in clean energy tax credits in reconciliation, including incentives to accelerate domestic production of solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, and critical materials processing. That doesn't sound like a recession to me. Thank you very much.
And we've been listening to President Biden discussing the economy. He praised the deal reached by Senate Democrats on a budget plan that addresses climate change and inflation. He is also urging the House to pass this as well.
CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian joins us once again now from Capitol Hill. Okay, Nicole, break down for us some of what is in the package we just heard the president talking about.
Yeah, well, you heard him give some of those highlights in terms of $300 billion in investments for deficit reduction, about $369 billion for climate and energy programs over the next decade. He also talked about the fact that this will help lower the cost of prescription drugs by allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He talked about extending the subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, which ultimately will lower premiums for families who get their insurance through the ACA. He also talked about no taxes being raised on families who make $400,000 or less, which is a pledge that he has made since the campaign in terms of the revenue and how this would be paid for, some of which will be paid for through 15% global minimum tax. And you heard him talk about the fact that, many corporations don't pay income tax. And so, this is about corporations paying their fair share. And so that will be one of the revenue raisers that's a part of this package.
And Nicole, again, we also heard President Biden speaking more about this deal that he reached with Manchin and the Majority Leader Schumer and Manchin reached and was announced Wednesday. How does what they've finally agreed on, compare to past failed attempts?
Well, the bottom line is that this, is significantly trimmed down. I mean, you'll remember at one point in time, this bill was upwards of $6 trillion, and it came down to $3.5 trillion. Then it was like somewhere in the range of about $2 trillion, and now we're down to, I believe, about a $700 billion package. So, look, I mean, this has gone, as we discussed earlier, through a lot of different iterations, and there are some components of this bill that are no longer there. You heard the president talk about, continuing to work on issues like child care and health care and elder care. I mean, while health care is part of this package, but things like extending the child tax credit, that was something that Democrats had really hoped would be part of a bigger, more robust package, and at one point in time was part of the package. Providing for universal pre-K, that was something else that was a high priority for Democrats that was initially in this package. So those are things that you heard the president say, are issues that he will now continue to work on, since of course they continue to be high priorities for Democrats. But that being said, in terms of the sentiment here on Capitol Hill, many Democrats we talked to this morning were very optimistic about this package and also acknowledge what we hear the president acknowledge, that it may not have everything everybody wanted or once had, but that they hope it will be sufficient to get enough support, especially here in the Senate, from every member in the party.
And we also heard the president talk about the word of the day, which is recession and the economy and these economic numbers. And I'm wondering what you're hearing from lawmakers on the Hill. Is this a word that you hear a lot on the red side and not at all on the blue side, or is it mixed? Or how are lawmakers feeling about the economy, about the word recession, and about the health of this economy going forward and going into the midterm elections, where we know there'll be a topic of discussion?
Well, look, it's an issue of concern on both sides of the aisle. Certainly, we have heard from Republicans more so in terms of hammering the administration and Democrats for not paying enough attention to this issue of inflation and rising prices and kind of being late to the party. And Democrats saying, well, it is of concern to us. That is why this particular package was such a key priority for them, because they have been looking for different ways to try to bring costs down. And this by far would be one of the more substantial packages that they put forward. And again, would point out that Senator Joe Manchin, who was a key player in helping bring this deal to the fore, one of his key issues has been whether or not any type of legislation Democrats put forth would meet that test of it really addressing inflation and trying to bring some of these costs down. In his view, he believes this bill now does that, and so that's why he was able to back it very strongly. He said that he has consulted with a number of economic experts on this. He really touted the fact that, again, there will be a substantial investment to try to reduce the deficit. And again, this is also about reducing kind of everyday costs for Americans, whether it's, with respect to prescription drugs, whether it's with respect to energy prices. So that's why Democrats, at least as of now, feel very confident that if they can get this bill to advance, that it will kind of address a lot of those concerns that they've been hammered on over the past couple of months.
All right, Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill, thank you so much.
You bet.
And keeping on that topic, the U.S. economy shrank for the second consecutive quarter, as we just heard Nancy talking about there, amplifying fears of a possible recession.
The latest figures come just one day after the Fed boosted interest rates for the second time in as many months. According to the U.S., the gross domestic product fell 0.9% in the second quarter. That slowdown reflects significant shifts in business and consumer behavior as Americans look to conserve their spending.
CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger joins us now. Jill, great to have you with us on set.
Good to be here.
Economists have been wondering for months if we're heading into a recession. Some say we're already there. The White House says we are not. What is your take? What are the indicators that would clearly say we're in a recession?
Can we take a big, deep breath for a second? First of all, recessions are normal parts of the economic cycle. We don't like them. But, the reality is we're slowing down. Okay, so big picture, 2020 comes. Horrible pandemic, worst economic contraction since the Great Depression. Okay, great. We bounced back last year. We do have the strongest growth, 5.7%, strongest growth since 1984. Unfortunately, that also fostered a lot of inflation. So the Fed starts to raise interest rates, trying to slow the economy down. The economy's slowing down now. Whether or not we go into this classic definition of a recession, which would be determined by the National Bureau of Economic Research or not, it doesn't really matter. What matters is people are freaking out that prices remain high. It is hurting people who make less than the median household income of $60,000 or $70,000. And frankly, it's hurting everyone. But again, the low end suffering much more.
Right.
Can I ask just a stupid question? You touched on it a little bit. Does it matter if we call it a recession or not? We've spent so much effort trying to define it. Does it make a difference to the economy or to the consumer?
I think the problem